Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. My name is Lucas Martin. I'm 36, a cybersecurity analyst in Austin, and I was on a rooftop for my friend Aaron's birthday. Long tables, finger food, a rented speaker, coworkers mixing with college friends. I came straight from the office and planned to stay an hour. I was carrying 2 club sodas from the bar station when I saw her near the railing with a man from her team, Evan. I'd heard the name more than once during the past month. She stood close to him and angled her body so that anyone arriving would see them first. When I reached them, I offered her a glass. She took it without breaking eye contact with him. Introductions happened a minute later, flat and incomplete. This is my husband. No name. Evan gave a quick handshake that was already turning away. I'd met plenty of her co-workers before. None of them treated me like a placeholder. I noted the change and kept my voice steady. The room noise covered a lot, but not the details that matter. Her phone screen lit up again and again. She held it where he could see. The two of them reviewed something and laughed. When I asked how the quarter-end push was going, she waved it off. Evan answered for her with a short summary, then shifted back to lighter talk. It was clear whose attention she valued. I moved half a step back to give them space and to look around. A couple of Aaron's friends were near the food table, watching. Not gloating, just noticing. One raised his eyebrows. I acted as if I hadn't seen it. If I reacted, this would turn into a scene. I wasn't going to give anyone that. I tried once more to bring the conversation to neutral ground. I asked Evan where he moved from and how he was liking Austin. He gave short answers and drifted toward a story she was already encouraging. She touched his sleeve to emphasize a point. Small detail, clear message. I decided I'd finish my drink, circulate, and avoid hovering. I turned to step away. She pivoted toward me. If you're jealous, you can leave. No smile. No attempt to lower her voice. People within a few feet heard it and went quiet. The speaker kept playing, but the group around us paused. I held her gaze for a second, then set my glass on the corner of the table and said nothing. I didn't explain myself to the crowd. That sentence lined up with the last 3 months. Phone face down at dinner. New passwords. Late returns with no details. A colder tone when I asked about her day. The change wasn't one argument or one slip. I gave her nothing to work with. I drifted to the other end of the deck and found Aaron. We talked sports, his new project, and a short weekend trip he was planning. I listened and answered, but I was running a quiet audit in the background. In the past 10 days, I had updated my HR file and replaced her as my emergency contact with my brother. I had toured a month-to-month studio on the east side and written down the manager's number. I had put our passports and a few documents in my desk drawer at work for a week because home had started to feel unsecured. I hadn't told myself I was preparing to leave. I told myself I liked being organized. On the roof, the justification dropped away. I had been preparing because I didn't trust what I was seeing. I stayed another 40 minutes. I spoke with 2 of her colleagues I actually liked, grabbed a bite, and confirmed a meeting time with Aaron for next week. From across the space, I could see her scanning the group. When I passed near them on the way to the stairs, neither made room or paused the conversation. I wasn't angry. I was done pretending. On the stairwell, 2 of Aaron's friends caught up with me. They kept it light and didn't ask anything. At the street, I waited by the rideshare pickup. She arrived a minute later, cheerful voice, fast words about the turnout and the view and who was there. I let her talk. The car ride was quiet. She scrolled her phone. I watched the map. At a red light, she turned the screen away from me and tilted her head toward the window. That reflex used to bother me. It didn't tonight. I was paying attention to facts. She had tested how far she could push a line in public. She'd been confident I would explain it away like I had explained so much lately. I had no interest in that role anymore. At home, she dropped her shoes and went straight to the bathroom. I put the keys in the dish, set my wallet on the counter, and filled a glass of water. The kitchen was clean. The living room looked the same as always, but the space felt different because I had finally adjusted my position. I wasn't going to negotiate basic standards. If I had to keep explaining them, there was nothing to save. She came out and asked if I was still bothered by the party. I said we could talk tomorrow. Not to delay, to make sure I didn't speak from heat. She shrugged, grabbed her phone charger, and went to bed early. I stayed up another 20 minutes and made a short list on a note card. Copy the lease, secure mail, confirm studio availability, move a few clothes to the gym locker, schedule a call with a lawyer for information only. I slept lightly. When I woke, I checked my work calendar, moved 2 calls, and took a longer shower. In the mirror, I didn't look angry. The party had not created a problem. It had shown me the size of the one I had been minimizing. Over breakfast, I asked how she felt about last night. She said it was fun and that I should relax more. I asked if she understood how her line landed. She said I was being sensitive. I said I wanted clarity about where we stood. She tapped her phone and said we'd figure it out. That was enough information. I rinsed my cup, cleaned the counter, and sent myself an email with the subject line "Action Items," then drove to work. On the way, I stopped by the studio building I had toured and checked the posted hours for the office. I didn't go inside. I already knew what I would do if the next conversation went the same way. At my desk, I opened a clean document and wrote several sentences. I am not a prop. I am not a person who accepts public disrespect. I closed the file and started my first task of the day. That felt right. No long speech. Just a plan that would not require a second warning. Later, when my phone buzzed with a casual message from her about dinner, I answered with a neutral time and left it at that. I wasn't performing distance to get a reaction. I was building a margin so that whatever happened next, I would not be scrambling. The rooftop had done me one favor. It forced me to stop guessing. I had what I needed. The next move would be quiet and final, and I would not announce it twice. The day after the rooftop, I treated it like any other workday. I made coffee, packed my laptop, and left on time. She stayed in bed, face down in the pillow, phone in hand. When I asked if we could talk that evening, she said, "We're fine. You overreacted." In the office, I finished a ticket, then pulled up a short list I'd written the night before. Copy the lease. Photograph valuables. Check balances. Confirm the studio's availability window. I wanted to see whether the pattern would hold without prompting. By noon, she posted a photo from a cafe near her building. Evan's reflection was caught in the window. No tag. She knew what she was doing. I closed the app and answered a security audit request. That night, she said she'd eaten with coworkers and wasn't hungry. She brushed past me, dropped her bag, and spent an hour on her phone. When I asked what time she expected to be home the next day, she gave the same answer she'd been giving: "Don't worry about it." I said I wasn't worried. She rolled her eyes and said I was being rigid. I cleaned the counter and kept my voice level. 2 days later, we had dinner with her family. Her mother asked if I was loosening up and said a man should avoid holding a wife back. It wasn't a question. Her sister chimed in about independence and said couples our age should spend more time with friends. I said we were managing our schedules and left it at that. On the drive home, my wife said her family gets it and I should learn to relax. I said I understood their view and that I wanted clarity about ours. The next week, she started announcing plans, not proposing them. Drinks after work Thursday. Happy hour Friday. A friend's birthday Saturday. When I asked if these were mixed groups or mostly single friends, she called it policing. I said I was asking for information I should reasonably have. She said, "If you're jealous, you can leave." Same tone as the rooftop. No humor or hesitation. At home, touch vanished completely. She took her phone to the bathroom and to the kitchen. If I walked into a room, the screen flipped down or angled away. I started small logistics instead. I scanned the lease and saved a copy to a private folder. I photographed serial numbers on my laptop and camera. I moved a change of clothes to my gym locker and a second set to my desk drawer. One evening, I asked directly, "Is there someone else?" She said I was paranoid and needed to work on trust. I told her trust depends on consistent behavior. She shrugged and said I should stop making drama. I went quiet. There was nothing more to learn in that exchange. Social settings grew more pointed. At a friend's small get-together, she corrected me over a minor detail about a restaurant we'd tried months ago, then made a side comment about how I remember things differently. A few people looked down at their plates. I finished my drink, helped clean up, and left without bringing it up in the car. She tried to bait a response by asking why I was so quiet. I said I didn't have anything useful to add. Her coworkers started appearing in her stories more. Group lunches, office jokes, her laugh in every frame. If she included me, it was a caption like "date night, maybe," followed by a photo of a cocktail without either of us in it. The message wasn't subtle. I stopped checking during work hours. After 9, I did a quick scan and then put the phone away. Aaron texted to grab a coffee. We talked about his project and a trip he was planning. He asked once, lightly, if everything was good at home. I said we were working through differences in expectations. He didn't push. That was the kind of conversation I could stand. Simple, factual. At home, I tested one boundary. I asked her to put the phone away for dinner. She said she needed to coordinate plans. I said 20 minutes would do. She lasted 5, and then said she needed to reply. I finished my meal and cleared the table. She noticed the lack of debate and looked confused for a second. Then she went right back to her screen. A few nights later, she came home after midnight. No text. When I pointed that out, she said her phone died. I asked for a heads up next time. She said I was keeping score. I didn't answer. I set an early alarm and left for the gym before she woke up. At my locker, I added a pair of running shoes and a basic toiletries kit. Back at my desk, I requested a personal day for the following week. My note said household admin. When we did talk, she rephrased events in her favor. The rooftop became, you getting sensitive. The coworker was a friendly guy who helps with deadlines. The line she'd used, if you're jealous, you can leave, became, you taking my joke the wrong way. I didn't correct each point. I said I heard her. Then I returned to practical matters, schedules, shared obligations, bills due this month. She showed little interest in any of it unless it involved her plans. Her mother called me once and asked if I could be more supportive of her growth. I said I supported growth that didn't require public disrespect or secrecy. She paused, then said relationships change and men need to adapt. I thanked her for sharing and ended the call. By the end of the second week, I had what I needed to decide. Not proof in the courtroom sense. Proof in the daily sense. Consistent coldness. Public digs. Vague schedules. A fixed line delivered more than once. Each time I stayed calm, she escalated the tone, as if calm made her uneasy. She started using friends as messengers. She just needs space. Don't make it worse. Be a team player. I responded the same way to all of them. Thanks. We'll handle it. I set 2 appointments on my personal day. One with the studio manager to confirm lease terms and parking. One with a family attorney for a paid hour to understand options. I brought a folder with copies of the lease, bank balances, and a short timeline of the last 3 months. I asked questions and wrote down answers. That night, she tried a different angle. She asked if I planned to apologize for embarrassing her by walking away at the party circles where she was standing. I reminded her I hadn't made a scene. I also reminded her of her sentence from the rooftop. She said I was twisting things. I said I was quoting. She turned away and said she needed a shower. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. I packed a small duffel with gym clothes, 2 changes for work, and a notebook. I put it in the trunk. I checked my email and cleared urgent tasks so the rest of the week would be flexible. She texted midday, asking if we were still on for a friend's birthday that weekend. I said yes. I wanted to see if she would try the same stunts in front of the same crowd. If she did, that would make the choice simple. The pressure didn't break me. I wasn't confused anymore about what I was seeing. She wanted the role and the attention that came with it. She wanted me compliant, quiet, and present when useful. I had no interest in living like that. I wouldn't announce a change twice. When I moved, it would be clean and final. All that remained was to confirm what I already knew and pick the day. I chose a date instead of waiting for the next incident to justify it. A Wednesday made sense. I had already taken a personal day, met the studio manager, reviewed the lease, and asked direct questions about deposits, parking, and mail. The terms were simple, month to month, 1 parking spot, key fob at signing. I signed, paid, and took the keys. No announcements or warnings. On the way back to our place, I stopped at the office to pick up the envelope where I'd kept copies of our documents for the last week. Passports, my birth certificate, insurance cards, a USB drive with scans. I sent 1 email to myself with a short checklist, switch delivery address, start mail forwarding, change contact info on critical accounts. Then I drove home. She texted that she'd be late, team drinks. I wrote back 1 line. Noted. The apartment was quiet. I pulled 2 rolling suitcases from the closet and a duffel from the shelf. I packed clothes for 2 weeks, work outfits, gym gear, shoes, chargers, toiletries, my laptop stand, and the small lockbox where I keep my watch and a few items from my father. I left shared property where it was. In the kitchen, I opened a cabinet and chose 2 mugs and 1 pan I'd bought before we married. I took 1 set of sheets and a towel set. I checked the dresser and nightstand and took only what was clearly mine. I made a quick photo log of the state of each room and dropped the pictures into a dated folder. I wiped the counters, emptied the trash from my desk, and put my keys in a small dish by the door. Then I took one key off the ring and kept it. The spare went into a sealed envelope with a printed note. Key for pickup, Saturday, 10 to 12. Leasing office only. I wrote my initials and left it on the entry table. I wasn't going to be part of a scene in the hallway. In the bedroom, I looked once at the space I'd been sleeping in without rest. I opened the bottom drawer and found a few cards she'd given me years ago. I left them. Sentiment wasn't going to help me make better choices now. I zipped the suitcases, carried them to the car, and made 2 trips without rushing. No neighbors stared. At the studio, I parked, rolled everything inside, and set the suitcases against the wall. The place was small and clean. I assembled a metal clothing rack I'd picked up on the way, hung shirts, lined up shoes, and made the bed. I plugged in the lamp, set my laptop on the small table, and tested the key fob. The door latched the way a door should latch. I stood there, breathing evenly, and felt relief that had nothing to do with winning. It was just a correct next step. I ordered a simple dinner and ate at the table. I sent 2 messages, one to my brother, one to Aaron. I moved out. I'm fine. I won't be sharing details. Coffee next week works. Both replied with short confirmations. No advice or questions. That was all I wanted from anyone. After dinner, I opened my notebook and worked through the list. Mail forwarding to a P.O. box near the office. Shipping address on online retailers updated. 2 streaming services moved to my personal billing, 1 canceled because I didn't use it. I removed my card from anything she regularly used and left shared utilities untouched. Those were tied to the apartment I was leaving behind. I updated beneficiaries and emergency contacts. I put a calendar hold for a session with a therapist I'd already selected, and I moved the attorney consult notes into a labeled folder. None of this was revenge. It was separation. I turned my phone face down and let the night pass without checking it. When I finally looked, there were 3 texts from her, a photo from a bar, a line about staying with friends, and don't wait up. I didn't respond. I wasn't at that address anymore. At 6 the next morning, I ran, showered, and drove to work early. I told my manager I'd changed addresses and updated my HR profile. I kept my deliverables on schedule. At lunch, I bought a cheap set of plates, a laundry basket, and a doormat. Back at the studio, I put everything away and returned to the office for the afternoon shift. That evening, she called once. I let it ring out and sent a short text. Leave any apartment matters with the leasing office. I'll coordinate with them. She replied with a string of questions and 1 accusation about me being dramatic. I didn't answer. I had already said where logistics would be handled. Before bed, I walked through the new place with a practical eye. Window locks worked. Smoke detector tested fine. I laid out tomorrow's clothes, set coffee for the morning, and placed my running shoes by the door. I slept without waking to check the door or the phone. The next day, I sent a short email to the leasing office at the old building confirming the key envelope and Saturday pickup window. I copied myself and archived it. I also sent a brief, neutral message to her work email. I've moved out. For anything related to the lease or access, coordinate with the leasing office during their posted hours. I kept it to 2 sentences. No history or accusations. I met with the therapist after work. I explained the last 3 months in a straight line and described my decision. We set a weekly time. When I left, I scheduled a second appointment with the attorney to review next steps, depending on how things developed. On Friday, I returned to the old apartment during business hours while she was at work. I packed 2 more boxes of books and personal files and left the spaces neat. I took 3 framed photos from my office corner and left any shared pictures on the wall. I checked the thermostat, locked the door, and walked away without looking back down the hall. I dropped the boxes at the studio and went to the gym. Saturday, I arrived at the leasing office window at 9:58, handed them the key envelope, and confirmed they would release it only to her with ID between 10 and noon. The manager nodded and entered a note in their system. I thanked them and left. At 12:07, I received an automated message that the envelope had been collected. There was no reason for further contact. Over the weekend, I organized the studio. I set up a small workspace, stocked the fridge, and made a grocery list that fit one person's life. I called my parents and told them I'd moved. I stuck to the basics and asked them not to chase details. They agreed. I called my bank and confirmed separate alerts for any unusual transactions. I reviewed my calendar for the next month and cleared optional events that didn't suit my new plan. When her message finally came, it was long and unfocused. It jumped from jokes to demands to memories to a line about how I'd made a point. I read it once and archived it. If there was anything to settle, it would be scheduled and specific. By Sunday night, the studio felt functional. Bed made, clothes hung, dishes clean, a single chair in the corner for reading. I set the alarm for 5:45 and placed the phone on the far side of the room. On Monday morning, I left early and drove past the old building on my way to work. I didn't slow down. There was nothing there I needed. She had the apartment she insisted on treating as hers. Now it was. My life had a new address, a new lock, and a plan that didn't require her consent or her approval. I hadn't tried to change her or debate her into agreement. I had done the only thing that brought the chaos to zero. I left, cleanly, and made sure every step after that lined up with that decision. The first week after I left, I kept my schedule tight and my phone on silent during work hours. I was finished arguing. Anything important would come through the channels I'd set. The leasing office confirmed the key transfer. My mail forwarding started. The studio took shape in small steps that made sense. Messages arrived in uneven waves. A paragraph late at night about how I'd made a point. A set of old photos from vacations with a line about missing us. An accusation that I was punishing her. I read each once and archived them. When she asked for access or logistics, I replied with one sentence. Coordinate with the leasing office. When she tried to restart the relationship talk, I said nothing. I had already said everything I needed to say by leaving. Mutual friends reached out. Two asked if I was okay. I said I was fine and preferred not to discuss it. Aaron told me he'd heard 3 different versions of the rooftop night from her circle. In one, I had overreacted. In another, I was jealous of a harmless coworker. In a third, I had abandoned her without warning. He didn't press me for details because he had been there. He saw what happened. That was enough. Her mother called and opened with a lecture. She said marriage required patience and that I should come home to talk it out. I said I would not return to a situation that included public disrespect and evasive behavior. She said I was being extreme. I repeated my position and ended the call. The coworker faded from her feed. He still appeared in group shots, but he wasn't beside her anymore. I told them to stop forwarding anything and left their messages on read. My attention had to stay on my own side of the line. She tried a different tactic. A friend texted me to set up a neutral conversation. The time, date, and location were all decided without asking me. I declined and said any necessary exchange of items could be handled through the building or at a public place with a clear purpose. The friend replied that I was being cold. There were small public tells that didn't require detective work. She started posting long captions about independence and growth. Comments from her closest friends were shorter than before. One of them untagged herself from an older album. Another messaged me privately to say she didn't agree with how the party played out. At work, my output went up. My manager thanked me for jumping on a late security review. I ran before sunrise most days and saw the same 3 people on the trail. No one asked anything. The predictability felt good. I checked it at lunch and again at night, handled logistics, and let everything else sit. She appeared at the old apartment one afternoon and spoke with the leasing office. The manager emailed me a brief note that she'd picked up the key and asked about my whereabouts. They told her they don't share resident locations. Professional, short, finished. She sent me a series of messages after that, saying I was making her look foolish. A neighbor from the old building texted that she had seen my wife carrying a few bags in and out alone. No commentary, just an observation. I thanked her for the note and asked her not to send more. The next attempt came through work. She emailed my company address with a subject line about urgent personal matters. I forwarded it to my personal email, replied from there with one line about handling lease issues through the office, and set a filter to send future emails from her to a folder I would check once a day. Her circle adjusted. The jokes she used to make about me in group settings didn't land the same way without me there to absorb them. One mutual friend ran into me at a coffee shop and tried to draw me into a postmortem. I said I wasn't discussing it, wished him well, and left. He texted later and apologized. People learn when you don't feed the habits they lean on. My parents asked once if there was anything they should say if contacted by her family. I told them to keep it simple. We are not involved. They did. My brother kept our calls on normal topics. Work, football, a small remodel he was doing. Those conversations felt like good footing. No drama to manage. She escalated to guilt, then to panic, then to charm. In one message, she said she had overreacted that night and wanted to reset. In another, she said she had done nothing wrong and I was punishing her to impress my friends. When neither angle worked, she wrote that she had made mistakes and needed me to fix this with her family. I didn't answer any of it. I had already fixed the only part that was mine to fix, my presence. Saturday became my standard errand day. Groceries, laundry, a stop at the hardware store for a better lockbox. I liked knowing exactly where my things were and who had access. I kept receipts and a short list of what belonged to me. On Sundays, I cooked for the week and packed lunches. A week later, she tried to corner me outside my office. She waited by the lobby doors around quitting time. The receptionist called my extension, and I left through another exit. I sent her a message with 2 lines. Do not come to my workplace. If you need to exchange items, suggest a time and a public location with a specific list. She replied with a stream of messages that started with apology and ended with accusation. I archived the thread and went to the gym. People who had defended her position started to soften. Because of what she kept doing. She made promises to show up and canceled. She told 3 people 3 different reasons for why I left. She hinted at private details that didn't exist. The pattern spoke louder than any explanation I could have offered. When we finally scheduled a brief exchange of boxes through the leasing office, the manager set a time and held the items. I arrived at the start of the window and left before the end. No face-to-face. She picked up after. Later that night, she texted a photo of an empty shelf in the apartment and wrote that the place felt wrong without me. Her last push in this phase was a long message about how she needed me. The word had weight the first time I read it, then lost all weight when I looked at the timeline. By the end of the month, the noise around us faded. Friends stopped asking for updates. Her posts slowed. The coworker was out of frame. The apartment that once felt like a stage was just another address I drove past without a second look. I had not raised my voice, embarrassed her in public, or dragged anyone into sides. I had taken my name, my things, and my attention, and I had placed them where they were respected. That was the consequence she hadn't accounted for. Not punishment, just a reality she couldn't bend with pressure or charm. She said I could leave if I was jealous. I wasn't jealous. I was done. And once that was true, her game had nothing to attach to. For weeks after I moved out, the calls and long texts slowed. People had given their opinions, traded stories, and moved on to other topics. My routines held. Early runs, steady output at work, 1 therapy session each week, a short call with my brother on Sundays. We scheduled 1 in-person exchange through the leasing office at the old building. Daylight, weekday, 30 minutes, items listed in advance. I arrived on time with 2 boxes she had asked for. She came 5 minutes late and asked if we could talk somewhere private. I said the office was fine and pointed to the list. She opened the boxes, checked the contents, and tried to start a different conversation. I didn't follow her into it. She said she hadn't meant to hurt me. I acknowledged the words and asked if anything else on the list was missing. She shook her head. We signed the handoff forms and left at different times. No second meeting. That afternoon, I completed the last administrative tasks. I changed my filing status with payroll, updated health insurance information, and removed her as an emergency contact from 2 old profiles I had missed. I closed a shared storage unit and moved my documents to a small fireproof box in the studio. I set a calendar reminder to review all accounts in 3 months. I finished the day with 1 email to my attorney confirming that I was ready to proceed with the filing. He sent back the steps and expected dates. Nothing dramatic, just the process. Friends adjusted. The ones who wanted drama learned they wouldn't get it from me. The ones who respected boundaries stayed in touch about normal things. Aaron and I kept our coffee on Thursdays. We talked about a client rollout and a minor injury he picked up at the gym. Work stayed clean. I took 2 extra audits and delivered them early. My manager noted the improvement and asked if I wanted to mentor a junior analyst. I said yes. I changed my HR address, added the P.O. box for mail, and scheduled a half-day to finish moving remaining files from my desk drawer at the old office location we were closing. Clear desk, clear calendar. She sent 1 long email through her personal account. It moved between apology, blame, and invitation. The subject line said we should start fresh and rewrite the rules. I read it once. I didn't respond. I created a filter to auto-file anything from her into a folder I check on Fridays for logistics. If there was a specific, necessary request, I would see it there. If not, it would sit unread. That kept the line simple. My parents visited for lunch. I told them the short version of events and the decision I had made. They asked if I was certain. I said I was. They didn't argue. We ate, went for a walk, and talked about my mother's volunteer project and my father's new tablet that he couldn't figure out. They left in the afternoon. When the door closed, the studio felt like mine in a way it hadn't before. I bought 2 practical items I had been putting off, a solid desk chair and blackout curtains. I donated clothes I didn't wear and dropped off a second set of dishes at a charity shop. My grocery list shrank to what I ate each week. My budget balanced without effort. The noise in my head about what might happen next was gone because the next steps were already on the calendar. There was one accidental encounter. I walked into a coffee shop near my office and saw her in line. She saw me, looked at the floor, and stepped aside. I nodded and ordered. She didn't speak, and neither did I. I took my drink and left. No message followed. The legal paperwork went in. I kept communication with my attorney brief and answered requests for documents within a day. He handled filings. I handled work and health. I didn't track her responses or watch for updates beyond what I needed to sign. I told 2 people in my circle that the process had started, and I asked them not to discuss it with anyone else. One evening, she texted to say the apartment felt empty and asked if we could meet to talk. I replied with 2 sentences. I wished her well. I would not be meeting to revisit the relationship. She sent 3 short messages after that. Sadness, anger, bargaining. I didn't answer. I had said the only thing that mattered. My therapist asked what I wanted from the next year. I listed concrete goals: complete the certification I had been postponing, take a week off to visit my brother's family, add a second run day, and rebuild savings to a set number. No speeches about healing, no grand plans. A few actions, tracked and done. We ended the session with a review date. It felt like a normal appointment with clear work to complete. I told the leasing office at my studio that I would extend the lease through the next year. I arranged for a small couch to be delivered and assembled. I hung a single framed photo from a hiking trip with my brother. No other decorations. News reached me through others that she was adjusting her story again. Sometimes I had left without warning. Sometimes I had set traps. On the final day of this part of the process, I stood in my kitchen and looked over the list I'd made weeks earlier. Every item had a check mark. Keys returned. Accounts separated. Mail forwarded. Legal steps underway. Health steady. Work stable. I closed the notebook and put it in a drawer. The story didn't need a dramatic last line. It needed consistent actions that matched the standard I set that night on the rooftop when I chose silence over a scene. She once told me I could leave if I was jealous. I wasn't. I left because I choose not to live with open contempt and public challenges dressed up as jokes. I didn't try to repair what someone else kept breaking.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.